Hey everybody, this is Tracy here with another edition of A View from Tracy's Point, and we are back with the cross-examination of faith. And I just want to point out, you guys see how they introduced that video in the last part that I read, which was the second half or the second day of Faith being on the stand under direct examination. And so they came up with this video and we were like, okay, we finally get to see the video, and then it turned out to be nothing. So we still haven't seen a video that actually shows some of this stuff that they are accusing this man of. And so the last video was the second day of Faith being on the stand. And so now it is time for the cross-examination. And so that is where we're going to pick up. And Kanik is doing the examination. And so he starts out and he says, before you started your testimony yesterday, you had met with the government to go over the questions that they were going to ask of you in this courtroom. Am I correct? Correct. And you also spoke with them last night. Incorrect. You didn't speak with them last night? I didn't speak with them last night. You said you did or you didn't. I didn't. You did? Donnelly did not. Then Faith said, did not. Kanik, when was the last time you spoke with them? This morning when we said good morning. And other than the good morning, you had no communication about the facts that you just testified to today or yesterday. Can you ask your question again? When you spoke with them and said good morning this morning, did you discuss any of the details concerning what you've been telling the jury? No, we discussed me looking at something that I had already seen. What was it that you looked at? Do I have to answer that question? Donnelly, yes. I'll let you know if you don't. Okay, let me stop right there, although I'm laughing already. But for those of you who are new to these transcript readings, unless I'm talking about Donnelly or one of the members of the defense or prosecution objecting, we're just going to flow through this conversation. The person asking the question is the lawyer in this case, because this is the cross-examination. So this is the defense that's asking the questions. Faith is on the stand. Faith Rogers is on the stand and she is the one answering. And so I'm not going to keep going back and forth saying who it is that's talking. So you have to follow the conversation. If a question is being asked, it is the defense attorney, Kanik. If the person is answering the question, then it is most likely Faith. And then if Faith turns around and asks a question of either the judge or the attorney, then I'll let you know that it's Faith asking the question. So right now we have Faith saying, no, we discussed me looking at something that I already seen. And then Kanik is saying, what was it that you looked at? And then Faith asks Donnelly, do I have to answer that question? And then Judge Donnelly says, yes, I'll let you know if you don't. And then Faith replies, okay, it was a picture of my text. I was looking at the time. And now Kanik is asking a question. And he says, that was something concerning about the case. Am I correct? And then the prosecutor, Ms. Shihada, chimes in and says, objection as to form. Donnelly, did you look at anything else besides that text? Because see, they're getting on Donnelly's nerve. And so she has been on them since the beginning about the form. And form is the way that they're asking the question too, because they can't lead the witness, and they can't tell the witness what it is that they want her to say. So they have to form the question in a way that she answers the question on her own without them, giving her hints and clues as to what she's supposed to be asking. And then Donnelly is so over it that when they do these objections, she just formed the question the way she thinks it should be asked instead of having the attorneys do it. And that, if this ends up in a guilty verdict, that may be another thing for appeal, that Donnelly was questioning the witness, because there have been times when she has done like 4 or 5 questions in a row. But anyway, that's what's going on right now with this back and forth. And then Faith responds to, "No, I just looked at the time." And then Donnelly says, "Okay, next question." So Kanik resumes with his cross-examination. "Now, before yesterday, when was it that you last met with the government to discuss the case?" "Have." Shahada, objection. As to form, she testified she didn't meet yesterday. Kanik, I said before yesterday. Donnelly, the objection is overruled. Faith, can you ask the question again? Before yesterday, when was the last time you met with the government to discuss this case? I saw them on Sunday. What time you saw them on Sunday? I'm not sure. You saw them in the morning? I don't remember what time I saw them. So you don't remember what time you saw them on Sunday, but you remember all these details from 3 years ago. Objection. Overruled. Correct. That's Faith. Do you remember what time you left them on Sunday? No. Do you remember how much time you spent with them on Sunday? No. What about other than Sunday? Had you met with them before to discuss the details of this case? Correct. Does that mean you did? Yes. And what date was that? I'm not sure of the exact date. And was it a week prior? I'm not sure of the exact date. I'm not asking you about the exact date. I'm asking you if it was a week prior. Donnelly, I'm a little confused right now. Are you asking before Sunday, the time before that? Kanik, yes. Donnelly, okay, just approximately. Did you met with them before Sunday, correct? Correct. Do you remember about when that was generally? I met with them last month, I believe, as well. So now Kanik picks back up, because remember I told you Donnelly just started questioning myself. So Kanik says, how many times have you met with the government before coming and giving testimony to this court? I'm not sure, to be exact. Now, was it more than 3? Correct. More than 5? I'm not sure. Before speaking to the government, well, at least withdrawn, you also made talk show appearances concerning what you're talking or telling us about now. Am I correct? You're correct. What talk shows have you been on to give your account as to what you said happened here? I've been on a few. I'm not exactly sure of all the names, but I've been on a few. You've been on Dr. Oz? Correct. Were you also on some social media shows? Correct. And you participated in SRK, correct? Correct. When did you start your participation in SRK? My participation in SRK happened after my lawsuit was filed. My question is, when was it that you started your participation in SRK? I'm not sure of the exact date. It was certainly before you went to New York for the premiere, am I correct? I'm sorry, can you ask that question again? Your participation in SRK started before you came to New York for the premiere. Am I correct? Correct. When was it that you made the trip to New York for the premiere? January 2019. When you participated in SRK, did you receive compensation? I received compensation for the picture of me, my sister, and R. Kelly. So you did receive compensation. For a picture, yes. How much compensation did you receive? $1,000 for the picture. $1,000 for the picture. Okay, that's all the monies that you received from your involvement with SRK. Correct. Did you receive any monies for any of the talk shows that you participated in? No. What about any of the social media appearances? Podcasts? No, sir. Now, what were you doing before withdrawn? And when was it you met R. Kelly? In 2017. And you were in college at that time? Correct. And you said that you realized college was not for you and you decided that you weren't going to pursue that anymore, correct? Correct. Now, after you made that decision, did you seek employment? No, sir. And so, at any point in time during your relationship with Mr. Kelly, were you employed? No, sir. Now, before meeting Mr. Kelly, had you been in pursuit of an acting career? No, sir. Before your involvement with SRK, were you in pursuit of an acting career? No, sir. After SRK, did you start pursuit of an acting career? The opportunity came and went. No, sir. And when the opportunity came, when you said that the opportunity came and went, what do you mean? I was asked to be a part of something. I considered it. I decided not to move forward. And was that project in Los Angeles? No, sir. You appeared on a podcast in LA. Yes, sir. What was the name of that podcast? I don't remember. You appeared on a podcast. Was there a host or a hostess? Correct. And you sat opposite that hostess. Am I correct? Correct. It was a female. Am I correct? Correct. An African American female. Am I correct? Correct. And you sat opposite her and you had a conversation for well over an hour. Am I correct? Correct. And in that podcast, you discussed some of the things that were happening for you since SRK. Am I correct? Correct. And you told her that you had opportunities that came about, opportunities, not an opportunity, but opportunities that came about for acting. Am I correct? I don't remember saying that with her. You know that was televised. Well, it was recorded and there is a video up. Correct. Now, after withdrawn, before your participation in SRK, did you have an attorney? Can you ask your question again? Before your participation in SRK, did you have an attorney? Yes. Who was that attorney? Lee Merrick. And Lee Merrick is an attorney out of San Antonio. Incorrect. I'm asking you a question. I'm not. Is Lee Merrick an attorney out of San Antonio? He's an attorney out of Dallas, Texas. So the answer to my question is that he's not from San Antonio. No. Now, did you at some point retain another attorney? Yes. And who was that attorney? Gloria Allred. And hold on, guys. I lost my space. Okay. And who was that attorney? Gloria Allred. And Gloria Allred is in the courtroom with you today, correct? Yes. And do you have any pending lawsuits? Yes. And is Miss Allred involved in those lawsuits? She is not. Another lawyer is? Lee Merrick. Now, when was it that you retained Miss Allred? Objection, Your Honor, as to relevance. Overruled. Once the whole trial and everything came out, the criminal process started. I got legal advising from Miss Allred. So, my question, ma'am, is when was it that you retained Miss Allred? I'm not sure of the exact date. Do you remember the year? Around 2019, I believe. And do you remember the month? No. That show, that podcast that I spoke to you about is called The Paper Route. Am I correct? Donnelly. It is called what? Mechanic. The Paper Route. The Paper Route? Yes. Yes. Donnelly need to get her damn hearing checked, I swear. So then Faith answers the question, correct. And what's the name of the hostess? I don't remember her name. That was my first time meeting her. My question was, what was her name? Donnelly, she says she did not remember. Next question. Okay, your appearance there was about a year ago. Give or take, yes. On that podcast, you also discussed the choices you made in connection with this with Mr. Kelly, correct? Correct. We'll get to it. Donnelly, I did not hear what you said. Canick, I said we'll get to it. Donnelly, oh. Canick, now, before you brought any lawsuit here, you and Mr. Merrick had a demand letter sent to Mr. Kelly for money. Am I correct? That's incorrect. Didn't you and Mr. Merrick send a demand letter to Mr. Kelly for $3 million? That is incorrect. I wasn't aware of that. Mr. Merrick was your attorney. Am I correct? Correct. You retained him. Am I correct? Correct. And you're telling this jury that he sent out a demand letter for $3 million you were not aware of? I did not read over the demand letter. I was not aware he was asking for $3 million or money. What did you hire him for? Objection. Sustained as to form. Well, you hired him to sue Mr. Kelly. Am I correct? Incorrect. You didn't hire this attorney to sue Mr. Kelly, claiming that he gave you herpes. May I answer? Donnelly, you can answer. Okay, I hired Mr. Merrick prior, before even looking at a lawsuit, to help me pursue criminal charges against Mr. Kelly, which I got no help from, so then came the lawsuit next. Okay, it became a lawsuit next? When was the first time you attempted to bring criminal charges against Mr. Kelly? In Dallas, Texas. My question is when. I don't remember the exact date. Canick, may I approach the witness? Donnelly, yes. Okay, I'm going to direct your attention to this highlighted area. You looked at the document, correct? Did it refresh your recollection that you went to the police department on April 9th, 2018? Correct. And you had Mr. Merrick file a lawsuit on April 17th, 2018. Am I correct? Can you repeat those dates again? Dallas Police Department, April 9th, 2018. Lawsuit, demand letter dated April 17th, 2018. Are you asking me a question? I did, and you asked me to give you the dates again. Can I have the question read back to her? Donnelly, sure. Canick, where she asked for the dates, so the record was read, and then Faith said correct. Okay, now, before making an effort to file a complaint with the Dallas Police Department, had you made an attempt to file a criminal complaint anywhere else? In New York. What was the date of that? I'm not sure of the exact date. And when you say that you filed one in New York, where specifically? I don't remember where specifically. Okay. Did you go to these places to file these lawsuits, these criminal? Correct. And as you sit here today, you don't have a recollection as to where you went? I do not know the exact location and city name. Was one in New York City? Correct. And was one in Westbury, Long Island? Donnelly, I think I am having a little trouble hearing you. Of course you are, Donnelly. You've been having trouble hearing the whole trial. Okay, I do not know if your microphone, better. Okay. Canick, you said one was in New York City. Do you remember the date of that? I don't remember the date. Wasn't that in January 14th, 2019? I don't remember the date. Well, let's see if this refreshes your recollection. The top portion, no down, right here, right there. Does that refresh your recollection? Yes. What's the date? Donnelly, again, your microphone is not. And then Cannon just keep on talking. He said, you said that refreshes your recollection. Yes. What's the date? January. May I see it again? Beg your pardon. Can I see it again? January 14th? What year? 2019. And you filed another lawsuit, criminal case in Suffolk County. Donnelly, she filed a criminal case or did she make a complaint? Canick, she made a complaint to file a criminal case. Donnelly, well, that is still shahada. Objection. Donnelly, it is still sustained as to form. First, you cannot file a criminal case. She made a complaint to detectives in Suffolk County. Is that what you are asking her? Donnelly, that's exactly what I'm asking her. Canick, that's exactly what I'm asking her. Donnelly, okay, or police officer. Okay, then Canick. Now, you made this complaint in June 21st, 2018, Suffolk County. I don't remember. Donnelly, you don't remember the date? You want to show her the Canick? Yes. Faith, I'm sorry, I'm getting confused. Donnelly, that is all right. He is going to show you the date. All he wants to know is whether you remember the date you spoke to the police in Suffolk County here in New York. And then Faith said, correct. So Donnelly said, does that refresh your recollection of when that happened? And then Faith said, correct. And then Donnelly, when was it? Faith, in 2018. And then Donnelly, but do you know the specific? And then Faith cut her off and said, June 2018. And Donnelly said, okay, next question. So Canick picks back up. Now, before coming in and speaking to us, you and I never spoken. Am I correct? Correct. Now, you testified and told us that there came a point in time that you went to a concert with your sister, and at some point that evening you met Mr. Kelly. Do you remember telling us that? Correct. And you testified and told us that you exchanged numbers. I did not testify and say we exchanged numbers. I said he gave me his number. And you did not give him your number? We texted. And at some point, there came a point where you had conversations afterwards. Correct. And there was an agreement or an understanding that you could visit him on some point, the road or wherever. Correct. In fact, he told you that whenever you wanted to, that you could visit him. Correct. So after he told you that, you made a decision that you would go and visit him. Correct. You made a choice. Am I correct? Correct. In fact, you met him at the show and you said that you were invited to an after party along with your sister, and he made certain overtures to you at that meeting. Am I correct? Correct. And after he made those overtures to you, you started texting. Correct. And eventually started speaking. Correct. And then eventually started FaceTiming. Correct. And in those communications, he flirted with you. Am I correct? Correct. And you returned the flirt. Am I correct? Correct. And then it came, as said earlier, that he invited you that if you want to come and visit, contact someone from his office. Correct? Correct. And you made that contact, right? Correct. Not your sister. You made that contact, right? Correct. And then you texted and you told Diana, correct? You told her Mr. Kelly says to get me a ticket. I didn't say give me a ticket. What did you say? I gave her the days I would like to come, and she checked with him to make sure that was okay, and then the flight was booked. Flight was booked, and eventually you got a return from Diana with respect to your interest in going to visit him. Am I correct? Can you say that again, please? Eventually, you got a response that Mr. Kelly said it was okay and a flight was booked. Correct. And then eventually you received the ticket. Correct. And the ticket was not in your name. Correct. The ticket was in another person's name. Correct. Another female? Correct. And after you got that ticket, you made the choice in saying, I ain't going. Donnelly, I did not hear what you said. I'm sorry. Did you say I ain't going? Canick, yes, I ain't going. Donnelly, that is all right. I just could not hear it. Canick, okay. Am I correct, ma'am? You're correct. And you made the choice, right? Correct. So after you got this ticket in someone else's name, you came to the conclusion that, you know what, that offends my dignity. I'm not going, right? I never said that it offended my dignity. Okay, why you chose not to go? I just felt like for the first time that was improper. Okay, let's talk about the second time. After you felt still that that was not the proper thing, you eventually continued to communicate with Mr. Kelly. Am I correct? Correct. And there were text messages. Correct. Telephone calls? Correct. FaceTimes? Correct. And you participated of your own will. Am I correct? Correct. You answered the phone when he called. Correct. You sent text messages. Correct. And you got involved into FaceTiming. Correct. And then eventually you decided, I'm going. I want to take another trip. Donnelly, take another trip? Canic, yes, to visit Mr. Kelly. Donnelly, has she been yet? Canic, well, give it another shot. Donnelly, all right. Okay, you gave it another shot. Can you ask me the question all over again? After exchanging communications, continuing to flirt, you decided that you would give it another shot to visit Mr. Kelly. Correct. Now, again, you made that decision. Correct. And you decided that you would then contact Diana. Am I correct? Correct. And you asked for another ticket. Am I correct? Correct. Okay, Your Honor, would this be a good time? Donnelly, sure. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to break for lunch. We are going to take a slightly longer lunch today. I have another matter to attend to, so we will be back at 2:30. Please don't talk about the case or look anything up or anything like that, but enjoy your lunches. Clerk, all rise. The jury exits the courtroom. Donnelly, all right, everybody can sit down. The witness can step out. We will see you after lunch. Anything from either side before we break from lunch? Shahida, not from the government. Scholar, no, Your Honor. Donnelly, okay. And Mr. Canic, I am going to ask my same fruitless question that I would ask all the time. Do you have a sense of how long you are going to be? I am just trying to figure out what we can accomplish today. I'm sure that we'll be finished with her before the end of the day. We may be finished with her probably around 4 o'clock, maybe. Donnelly, okay, all right. So then Canic cut her off and said, if that long. Donnelly, okay, all right. Everybody enjoyed their lunches. Lunch recess taken. And then the afternoon session begins. In open court, jury not present. Parties present. The clerk says, all rise. Donnelly, everybody can sit down. All right, let's get the witness, please. Discussion held off the record. Witness enters the courtroom. The clerk, all rise. Jury enters the courtroom. The clerk, you may be seated. Donnelly, all right, everybody, does it feel any warmer in here today? Jury, yes. Donnelly, glad to hear it. Wish I could say I had something to do with it. All right, we are ready to resume the cross-examination of the witness. Go ahead, Mr. Canic. Thank you. Clerk, the witness is reminded she is still under oath. Faith says yes, she understands. And then the first question, before going out to meet Mr. Kelly, well, let me withdraw that. After your initial meeting with Mr. Kelly at the after party, did you Google him? Yes. And why did you Google him? To find out who he was, because I wasn't a fan. And you did, in fact, read up about who he was. Can you ask that question again? You read, after you Googled him, you read what was returned. Am I correct? I'm sorry, can you ask that question again? You Googled him? Yes. You read what you saw on the computer. Am I correct? Yes. Okay, now, do you recall an instance where in your earlier communications with Mr. Kelly, he responded to you, come on, I am who I am. I see a few people, but I'm not married. Laugh out loud. Yes. And your response was, laugh out loud. I understand. Correct. Now, what did you take that communication to mean? I understood that he wasn't married. He dates multiple people. And he told you that in the initial part of the communication between the two of you. Am I correct? Correct. Now, you told us about a situation when you were dating your first boyfriend that you were assaulted by his other girlfriend. Do you remember telling us about that? The mother of his child, not his other girlfriend. Yes, I remember saying that. There's a distinction. The mother of your child and a girlfriend. Yes, there's a distinction. He was getting on Faith's nerves, y'all. Okay, then Kanik said, okay. And then Faith says, that's like a wife and a girlfriend, two different things. Okay, if I ask a question, please just respond to the question that I ask, okay? Now, you testified as a result of that, you developed a problem, epilepsy. Correct. And you testified that as a result, you have to be careful with drinking alcohol because alcohol may trigger a seizure. Correct. Now, you testified and told us as well that when you went to Mr. Kelly's after party, you had some alcohol. That is incorrect. I never said that. You didn't have any alcohol? I did not have any alcohol. There was an occasion where you did have alcohol with Mr. Kelly, am I correct? Yes. And you consumed the alcohol of your own choosing, am I correct? Can you ask that question again? Then Donnelly, I think he is asking, nobody made you drink alcohol, is that right? Correct. Then Donnelly, okay, next question. Lord have mercy. Kanik. So that wasn't just one time. It was multiple times that you consumed alcohol of your own choosing. Correct. Now you testified and told us that you were asked by Mr. Kelly to call him Daddy. Do you remember telling us about that? Correct. And you did call him Daddy. Am I correct? Yes. And in your conversations with him, you called him Daddy. Yes. And in your text messages, you called him Daddy. Am I correct? Yes. Now, that was of your choosing. Am I correct? Yes. He asked you to, and you decided, yes, I can call you Daddy. I respected what he asked to be called. Yes. Well, you didn't have to call him Daddy, right? No. In fact, if I recall your testimony correctly, you said that there was a time that he called you on the phone and you answered the phone, and basically he was not satisfied with you not calling him Daddy and he hung up. Do you remember telling us about that? Yes. And then, according to you, he called back again and this time you called him Daddy. Am I correct? Correct. Now, you had the option of not answering the phone. Am I correct? Correct. You knew it was him that was calling, am I correct? Correct. And you answered the phone and you called him Daddy. Correct. When you sent those text messages, you called him Daddy. Yes, sir. So he asked you to call him Daddy and you started calling him Daddy. Yes, sir. Now, let's talk about the first trip to New York. You testified and told us that there came a point in time that you asked for a trip to New York. Do you remember telling us about that? Yes. And you text Diana. Yes. And you asked for the accommodation to be arranged. Am I correct? Yes. You did all that, correct? Yes. And after you asked for the accommodation to be arranged, you got on the plane. Yes. And you took the plane to New York. Yes. In fact, wasn't this a connecting flight? Yes. Donnelly, I could not hear you. Witness, yes. Oh, Lord, it's getting late. So, you had an opportunity in Nashville where you made the connecting flight to change your mind, right? Yes. But instead, you boarded the next flight from Nashville to Long Island, right? Yes. And then you came there and you went to a hotel. Yes. What time you got to the hotel? I don't remember. Was it in the afternoon? I don't remember. Was it in the morning? I don't remember. Was it in the evening? Objection. Overruled. Do you remember what time of day? I don't remember. Now, you at some point contacted Diana after you arrived at the hotel. Correct. And you wanted to know what you should be doing, what's going to happen next. Am I correct? Yes. And could you speak a little louder? Yes. And basically, you had that option, right? You didn't have to go out. You contacted Diana to ask, what are we going to do next, right? Yes. Okay. And then Diana told you nothing was going to happen until 8 o'clock. Do you remember that? Yes. And then at 8 o'clock, sometime around that, you went to the concert. Yes. Okay. And you testified and told us that you didn't sit in the first row, but you were someplace very close to the front. Yes. Now, this was at Westbury Coliseum. Correct. And you testified and told the jury that Mr. Kelly actually performed to you. He was making eye contact with you and singing to you. Am I correct? Correct. And you stared back at him. Am I correct? Yes. Now, was the stage a rotating stage? I don't remember. How many acts you saw that night? Just him. And when you were watching Mr. Kelly, did you notice that the stage would rotate around and come back around? I don't remember if the stage was rotating. Well, according to you, during that show, he was singing to you. I stated he interacted with me during the show. Yes, I said that. Okay, now you testified that after the show you were asked if you were going to go to the after party. Incorrect. Were you asked if you were going to go to the after party? Are you referring to the show in New York? Well, that's what we're talking about. That's incorrect. I wasn't asked if I was going to go anywhere. Diana told me where I was going and where he was going. Did you go to the after party? No. Now, you got an Uber back to the hotel. Yes. And you were not told about the after party? I was told he was going to the after party and I was going back to my hotel. And you were told that and then you did, right? Yes. Okay. And then you testified and told the jury at some point in the early morning hours, around 6 o'clock, Mr. Kelly came to your room. Correct. And according to you, there was a sexual encounter that really humiliated you. I said it was awkward. Yes. Awkward? You didn't want that to happen. You told the jury, right? Correct. In fact, you felt a kind of way about it, that you even called your sister, correct? Incorrect. You called your friend, my best friend. Yes, and basically you called your best friend because you said that you wanted to find out if you were off. Incorrect. Okay, why did you call your best friend? I said I wanted to see what she had to say about the situation. Okay, and she had something to say about the situation, and you felt as though that whatever Mr. Kelly said to you as he was leaving the room was constructive criticism, according to you. Incorrect. I stated that's what he told me. I did not say that's what it was. So he told you that it was constructive criticism? Yes. Now, after he gave you that constructive criticism and after you went through the degrading experience with him, you flew back to San Antonio. Am I correct? Correct. And then there came a point in time, according to you, he contacted you again. Correct. And after he contacted you, you and he exchanged text messages. We were already exchanging text messages. Did you continue to exchange text messages? Correct. Did you continue to talk on the phone? Correct. Did you continue to FaceTime? Correct. And after this experience that you had in New York that you felt degraded about, you asked for another trip. Am I correct? We talked about another trip. Me coming again. Yes. You asked for another trip. Am I correct? He said he wanted to see me and I gave Diana the dates I was available. And you did that? Correct. Even after that experience that you supposedly had in New York. Correct. You decided, you know what? I want to see him again. Correct. Forget the fact that he constructively criticized me. I want to go back again. Correct. Forget the fact that he degraded me. I want to see him again. Correct. And after you made that decision to contact Diana, you got a ticket. Am I correct? Correct. You got yourself prepared. Am I correct? Correct. And you went to the airport. Correct. And you took the flight to where he was. Am I correct? Correct. And then after you got to that place, where was that place anyhow? Which place are you referring to? The trip after New York. I went back home. Come on. I know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. He's not being clear. I'm sorry, Your Honor. All right, everybody stop. You stop and you stop. The question is, I think the question is, what is the next place that you went to see Mr. Kelly? Do I have that right, Mr. Canick? Absolutely, Your Honor. All right, so that's the question. What city did you go to next? The city I went to next after New York was Chicago. All right, next question, Mr. Canick. So, in Chicago, you had another sexual encounter with him. Am I correct? Correct. An unwanted sexual encounter? Correct. And after you had this unwanted sexual encounter, you went back to San Antonio. Am I correct? Correct. And then you continued to exchange text messages with him. Correct. And you continued to have telephone calls with him. Correct. And you continued to FaceTime with him. Correct. And then you asked for another trip. We discussed me coming next time. Yes. And you discussed it after that degrading experience. Objection. Overruled. You discussed it and you decided that you're going to take another trip to see him. Correct. And you went through the same process. You contacted Diana. Correct. And you got out to the airport. Yes. And then you went to meet him again. Yes. When you met him again, where was that city? After Chicago, I went to Dallas. Okay. And Dallas was a similar experience. Another degrading sexual encounter. Am I correct? I never said that. You didn't like what was going on with him sexually. Am I correct? I didn't say that about the Dallas trip either. In the Dallas trip, you testified and told us that you consumed a lot of alcohol. Correct. In fact, you told us that it was Ciroc. Correct. Damn. Okay. And this was, now, you had been diagnosed with this condition that would cause you to have a seizure before you went to Dallas. Am I correct? Correct. And you knew that the alcohol would cause or could trigger a seizure. Am I correct? Too much alcohol can cause you to have a seizure. Yes. And you made that decision to consume the alcohol again. Am I correct? Correct. And after some point, I think you alluded to the fact that because of the alcohol, you had sexual encounters with Mr. Kelly. Am I correct? I never said because of the alcohol, that's why I had sex with him. I never said that. Okay. Now, you also indicated that you were left in the Sprinter for long periods of time. I didn't indicate. I said I was left in the Sprinter for a long period of time. Yes, so you indicated that you were left there while they were in the cigar bar. Incorrect. So you were left in the Sprinter. Correct. And how long were you left in the Sprinter? For a number of hours. When you say a number of hours, more than 2, correct. More than 4, it might have been about 4 hours. You didn't like that. Correct. In fact, you felt a little humiliated. I never said I felt humiliated. I'm asking you, did you feel humiliated? Humiliated? No. Left behind? Yes. And you didn't want to be left behind, right? Correct. You wanted to be with him, right? Correct. Okay. And you felt as though he was not sensitive to the fact that you wanted to be with him. Incorrect. I never said that. I didn't ask you if you said that. I'm asking you if that's how you felt. No. So when you said a short while ago that you felt left behind, it didn't bother you that you were left behind for about 4 hours? It bothered me for the amount of time that I was left behind. If he had something to do, that's his job. He's an entertainer. It was just being there. But weren't you upset that you couldn't leave on your own will? Correct. Weren't you upset that you didn't have food to eat? I was upset about not being able to use the bathroom. I wasn't hungry in the Sprinter. Okay, but you were upset about not being able to use the bathroom. Am I correct? Correct. And anything else about the trip upset you? No. So then eventually you went back to San Antonio. Yes, okay. And then after being left in the Sprinter in this occasion for an excessive amount of hours and feeling left behind, you decided to visit him again at another destination. Am I correct? Correct. And again, of your own will. Correct. You contacted Diana to make those arrangements for you. Correct. And what city did you go to next? Los Angeles. And it was in Los Angeles that you testified and told the jury that he was stern. Correct. And you testified and told the jury that he had a gun next to him as he spoke to you. The gun was beside him, yes. And frightened you, right? Maybe uncomfortable, yes. Very uncomfortable, scared, yes. And then he had unwanted sex with you. Oral sex, yes. You didn't want that. Correct. So he had a gun that frightened you, right? Correct. He performed oral sex on you that you didn't want. Am I correct? Incorrect. I never said that happened in LA. What? Then there was a pause. So he made you perform oral sex on him? Correct. And you definitely didn't want to do that, right? Correct. And then he left you for long periods of time. Correct? So, gun, performed oral sex on him, left you, and then eventually you went back to San Antonio. Correct. Did there come a point in time that you went to visit him again? Yes. So after all that, after being forced to perform oral sex on him, after being intimidated by him because he had a gun next to him as you spoke to him and leaving you behind, you went to visit him again? Correct. Your choice, right? Yes. What city did you go to this time? New York. So, New York. Now, I want to go back to something we started discussing before the lunch recess. Now, when you spoke to the New York police, when you filed the complaint against Mr. Kelly, you told them that Mr. Kelly penetrated your vagina and your anus, right? I never said that. May I approach, Your Honor? Sure. Read the second paragraph. Witness complies. You read it? Correct, I read it. Isn't it a fact that you told the police officers what's on that paper is incorrect? I didn't ask you. Donnelly, okay, first of all, let me finish the questions before you start to answer. He is going to ask you questions and let the witness respond. Canick. Thank you, Donnelly. So what is the question you want to put to the witness? Isn't it a fact that when you were interviewed by the police officers who took this complaint, you told them that he inserted his penis into your anus and your vajayjay? That is not a fact. So you didn't tell them that? No. And if it's here, they made it up. Well, that is not a fact. Donnelly, well, sustained as to whether they made it up. You're saying you didn't tell them that. Is that right? Faith, yes. And then Canick continues. And when you were speaking with them, were they taking notes? Yes. And you were the only one who were giving them details of this account that you were complaining that happened. Am I correct? Correct. Now, isn't it a fact that you also told them in that interview that Mr. Kelly told you that if you didn't allow, that he pushed you and said that he would not allow you to eat during the meeting? That's incorrect. And if it's in here, that's an error. Absolutely an error. Okay, and isn't it a fact that you told the detectives or whomever interviewed you that you were tested and found to be positive for herpes in December 2017? Incorrect. I never said that. Okay, you never said it, and if it's in here, then it's an error, 100% an error. Now, may I have a second, Your Honor, please? So there was a pause. Then Canick picks back up. Now, after this experience that you had in LA, where you said that Mr. Kelly had a gun near him as he spoke to you and that he violated you and had you wait around, you flew back to San Antonio. Yes. And did there come a time that you decided to visit him again? Yes. Where was that? New York. And now, the experiences that you had in those other visits, none of them were to your liking. Am I correct? Correct. And you felt as though he violated you in some fashion on each and every one of those trips. Am I correct? Correct. Sorry about that, y'all. Whoa. And those violations were sexual violations, correct? And you said that you felt as though that you couldn't go and use a bathroom when you wanted to use a bathroom, correct? And you felt as though that you were not given food. I never said that. And you were given food? I never said that. But do you say withdrawn? Now, after you had that experience in LA, you decided that you were going to contact Diana and arrange for another trip. Correct. And the same process, you contacted her and she sent a trip. And then you got to the airport and eventually got to what hotel was it? You're asking me about which trip. He asked what hotel you went to. Yes. Okay, which trip again? I'm sorry. New York. Okay, well, you went to New York twice, right? So I think you're talking about the last time, Canick. The last trip, Donnelly. The last trip, Canick. Yes. Okay, was it the Mondrian or something? And then Faith. Yes, the Mondrian. Donnelly. Okay, go ahead. Canick. And you got to that hotel by Uber? Yes. And again, this was your own volition. You decided. You had asked for this trip and you got the trip and you made the trip. Am I correct? Yes, sir. And I think you testified, withdrawn. At some point, you said you met someone by the name of Joy or Joyson. Correct. And what city was it that you met this person? Dallas. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Dallas. And you testified and you told us that she appeared to be unkempt to you. Am I correct? Correct. And you told us that you and her were in the Sprinter for a prolonged period of time. Correct. And this trip that you met Joy, you basically did not have a good experience in that trip either. I didn't say that the whole trip was terrible, but meeting her, it was a weird experience. And notwithstanding that, you made another trip. Am I correct? Correct. Now, you testified and told us about an occasion where you needed to go to the bathroom and Diana followed you from the Sprinter to the bathroom. Do you remember telling us that? She did not follow me. She led me to the bathroom. She led you? I didn't know where it was. Oh, okay. So she escorted you to the bathroom and she stayed there while you used the bathroom? Correct. And you didn't think that she was trying to restrain you in any way, am I correct? No. And you eventually went back to the Sprinter? Yes. And you walked back to the Sprinter? I followed her back to the Sprinter, yes. Right. She never put her hands on you, am I correct? No. Now, you testified and told us that when she escorted you to the bathroom, that basically she stood outside the stall. Correct. Right outside of the stall, you said. Correct. So you could, and that somehow caused you to be unnerved. Can you ask your question again? Were you, or did that bother you in any way that she stood outside the stall? It was different. I didn't understand it. Okay, but did it bother you? It was different. How so? Nobody has ever waited for me outside of the stall. Maybe outside the bathroom, but not directly outside the stall. Oh, okay. Okay. You were a guest of Mr. Kelly's, am I correct? Correct. And you knew that she worked for Mr. Kelly, am I correct? Correct. And were you aware that she had responsibilities to Mr. Kelly and his guests? She was his assistant, yes. And you knew that she was pretty much escorting you and whomever else was with you, Joy or whomever, wherever you went, am I correct? I didn't know she was an escort and is supposed to escort us everywhere we went. No, at the time I wasn't aware. Did you become aware of that? Later on. Now, there were times that, withdrawn. You were asked on direct examination about certain text messages that you sent to Mr. Kelly about the outfits that you were wearing. Yes, okay. He asked you and you sent them. Am I correct? Yes, you were in San Antonio when you were sending those photographs. Am I correct? Yes, and he was definitely not in San Antonio. Correct. And there was an occasion where you told him that you were going someplace. You sent that. Am I correct? Correct. And you sent that because you said that he'd asked you or said to you that he wanted to know where you're going to be. You're asking, like, what did I send exactly? I'm not understanding your question. It's not clear. He asked you at some point to keep him informed as to where you're going to be, according to you. Am I correct? Correct. And that's why you sent the photo to him. Am I correct? Sent a photograph, a text message of what? You and your friend at the Olive Garden. Me and my family at the Olive Garden? Yes, I sent him a picture. Right. And you sent that because he had asked you or said to you, let me know where you're going to be. He asked me where I was, clear as day in the text. So might the answer to my question be yes then? Objection. Well, overruled. I mean, he asked you where you were and you sent him a picture of where you were, right? He asked me like 2 questions in one, Your Honor. I'm sorry. That's okay. All right. But the question was, where are you? And you sent the picture, right? Or one of the questions. All right. Next question. And then there was a time where you sent him a picture of your outfit and asked him if that was okay. Yes, sir. And you did that because at some point he asked you to do so. Yes, sir. And you were in San Antonio when you sent that picture. Am I correct? Yes, sir. And of your volition, you sent it. Him an outfit. A picture of your outfit and asked him if that outfit was okay. Can you start over? At some point, you sent him a picture of the outfit and asked him if the outfit was okay. Yes, sir. Now, you testified and told us about a situation where Mr. Kelly, I think was in the LA trip in the studio, that it appeared to be jogging into where you were, grabbed something and jogged back out. Correct. Now, you knew before going out on any of these trips that Mr. Kelly was a very busy man. Am I correct? Correct. And you knew that he and his talents were in high demand. Am I correct? No, not at the time. But you learned that. Am I correct? I wasn't aware. You never learned it? Objection. Well, I am a little unclear. Are you asking her was his talents was in high demand? High demand, yes. All right. And did you know whether that was true or not? No, ma'am, I would not know that. All right, next question. So back to Canick. You Googled him, right? Objection, Your Honor. Overruled. You Googled him, right? Your Honor, may I? No. He's entitled to ask you questions. Just do your best to answer them. If you don't understand them, just let me know. You Googled him, am I correct? Yes. And the purpose of your Googling him was to find out about him, am I correct? Yes. And when you Googled him, you learned of all the #1 hits that he had, am I correct? No. You overlooked that part? Objection. Overruled. How much time did you spend Googling him? It literally was a Google, and then that's it. Your Honor, I'm not looking to see every #1 hit, latest album. It's not. Okay, if you didn't know that, that's fine. He's asking specific questions. Well, do your best to answer them. Can it? In fact, you spoke to one of your friends about Mr. Kelly after you initially met him. Am I correct? Incorrect. Didn't you tell us? Didn't you say in your interview with the government that you contacted after the after party, the first time you ever met Mr. Kelly, your sister was very excited and she said to you, you got to talk to Mr. Kelly. Yes, sir. You asked me if I talked to my friend. I did not. I had a conversation with my sister. Your Honor, I am going to ask you to instruct the witness to listen to the question and answer the question. She did. She said she didn't ask her friend. She asked her sister. Let's not argue, please. Put your question to the witness. Don't argue with counsel. Just answer his question. If you don't understand, say you don't understand and he'll rephrase it. Go ahead, Mr. Canick. Okay. So, isn't it a fact? So, you don't remember telling the government that you spoke to your friend about Mr. Kelly and having met him, and your friend said, you better talk to Mr. Kelly. He's a grown-ass man. You said right after the concert, sir, and that's not the conversation that was had. Okay, the question is, Your Honor, he's asking you, I'm sorry, may we just have a sidebar? No, we don't have to have a sidebar. Just the question is, you're saying that you spoke to your friend at a separate time. Is that right? Yes. These questions are very general, I'm not understanding. The questions are not clear, Your Honor, at all. Well, I think they are. If you have difficulty answering them, you let me know. Then Mr. Canick, can you put another question to the witness? Canick, after you had met Mr. Kelly initially, you contacted your friend. Am I correct? Sure. And you told your friend that you just met R. Kelly. Am I correct? Incorrect. You didn't tell your friend that you met R. Kelly? I did not initially after the concert. No, I didn't. Donnelly, sometime later, did you tell your friend that? Yes. All right, next question. Okay, and your friend said to you that you better talk to him. He's a grown-ass man. Correct. And your friend was excited. Am I correct? Encouraging. Encouraging? Yes, sir. And encouraging of you to speak with him, develop a relationship with him? Yes. Now, you followed that advice. Am I correct? Yes. And your sister was equally encouraging. Am I correct? Yes. And you followed her advice as well. Am I correct? Yes. Now, when you were in LA and you were waiting in the Sprinter, you felt uncomfortable because you were waiting in there for such a long time. Are you asking me if I felt uncomfortable? That's my question. Yes. And did you open the door? In LA? No, sir. And you text Diana? Yes. And she came? Yes. And she opened the door? Yes. And you and Diana went somewhere. Diana showed me where the bathroom was. Okay. And then you eventually came back to the bathroom, right? I think you said back to the bathroom. No, we didn't come back to the bathroom. Back to the Sprinter? Correct. Now, how many times did you have to text Diana in order to get her to come to take you to the bathroom? Are you asking me that night or just then? We're talking about that night. I had to text her twice about the bathroom. And there was the first text. And then about 15 minutes later, you sent a second text. I don't know. And then she eventually came? Yes. And you don't know what she was doing when she sent the text. Am I correct? At the time in LA, yes, I did know what she was doing the first time I sent the text. What was she doing? Waiting in the Sprinter with me in the passenger seat. And so she's in the passenger seat and you text her? Yes. Didn't call out to her? She wouldn't be able to hear me. That's not my question. My question is, you didn't call out to her. No. Now, then you eventually text her a second time and she got out of the passenger seat and I texted her to use the bathroom the first time in that setting and she said, okay, stand by. And she came back. Okay, now you testified earlier today about Mr. Kelly being asleep and you're picking up his phone and answering his phone. Do you remember telling us that? Incorrect. I never said I answered his phone. You looked at the messages coming on his phone. Am I correct? I looked at the screen. His phone is locked. Okay. And you looked at all of the phones. Am I correct? That he had. The 2, yes. Was it 2 or 3? There was 2 by me. And you had no fear doing that, right? No. And he didn't say anything to you about it. Am I correct? He didn't know he was asleep. So he didn't know. So when you picked up the phone and you looked at the messages, you said to us this morning that it was a group text and all of them were from women. Do you remember telling us that? No. You don't remember saying that before lunch? I said a group text of women. Of women, okay. There were names associated with the text messages. Correct. Basically, you discerned that all of those people were women. I went off the female names I saw on the screen. You saw some numbers on the screen too, right? Correct. Basically, you saw those calls, those messages, and you said you tried to wake him up. I tried to wake him up while his phone was going off before I looked at the phone. At some point, Diana came to the room, yes, and got him up to go to a meeting. Yes, sir. I asked you earlier this morning about the shows that you've appeared on to talk about this. You appeared on at least 7 shows, am I correct? I don't know the exact number. Do you recall appearing on something called Corin Cotter? Can you say that again? Corein. That's a show? I'm asking you. I never heard of a show called that. What about CBS This Morning? Yes, and on that show you appeared with your attorney, Miss Allred. Correct. Then you appeared on something called She Talk LA. Correct. And Dr. Oz. Correct. And on Dr. Oz again, you had Miss Allred with you. Correct. In fact, she participated in the interview. Am I correct? Correct. And then you went on something called Chelsea Grayson. That's a person. Yes. Did you have an interview with this person, Chelsea Grayson? Yes. Then you went on Channel 5. Channel 5, that's a channel. I don't know. Okay, but fair to say you appeared on at least 5 to 7 television shows. Correct. And podcasts as well. Correct. In one of the podcasts we spoke about this morning, the paper route. On that show you said during that interview, I don't like the word victim because I don't feel like I'm a victim. I'm a young woman, and let's be clear, I made a choice to be involved with that person. Do I feel like everything he did was right? Hell no, but I had a choice, and that's why I walked away. I did not move in with him. I did not live with him. I did not take any money from him. There is a choice that you have to make. You said that. Correct. You made a choice. Correct. And you're not a victim. Correct. Thank you. Donnelly, any redirect? Ms. Shahada. Yes, Your Honor. Donnelly, do you think it's long? I might be not. I'm a bad time to take a break. Shahada, I don't think it's very long. Okay, good. So on redirect examination, Ms. Shahada, good afternoon. Good afternoon. During cross-examination before the lunch break, you were asked some questions about how you remembered all these details from 3 years ago. Do you remember those questions? Correct. You provided the government with a screen recording of all your chats with Diana Copeland, correct? Objection. Overruled. Correct. That spanned the time that you began traveling and seeing the defendant, correct? Correct. As you testified, the defendant, told you to keep Diana apprised as things were happening on your trip, correct? Correct. And to ask for permission to do certain things, correct? Correct. Is it fair to say that having text messages from that time period is a way you've been able to refresh your recollection about certain details? Correct. You also asked some questions before lunch on cross-examination about your having been in college, then leaving college. Do you remember those questions? Yes. Had your parents supported you financially? Yes. And did that include while you were seeing the defendant? Yes. And do they continue to support you financially? Yes. Are your parents successful? Yes. Have you ever wanted for anything on the financial aspect? No. Did you ask the defendant to support you? No. You were asked some questions on cross-examination before the lunch break about certain dates, about when you went to the lawyer and when you went to the Dallas Police Department, and so forth. Do you remember those questions? Yes. One moment, Your Honor. Sure. Okay, you testified that you went to the Dallas Police Department on April 9th, 2018. Do you remember that? Yes. Mr. Canick, the defense attorney, showed you a document that indicated something about a demand letter sent on April 17, 2018. Do you remember those questions? Yes. April 9, 2018, that's before April 17, 2018, correct? Correct. So you went to the Dallas Police Department first, correct? Correct. You were asked some questions on cross-examination about various things that happened in your travels to see Mr. Kelly. Do you remember those questions? Correct. And I think you testified on cross-examination that certain things happened on those trips that you were uncomfortable with or that you didn't want to happen. Is that correct? Correct. You also testified yesterday that there were two sides to the defendant, correct? Correct. In fact, you testified that at the very beginning of your testimony, correct? Yes, that it wasn't all bad, correct? Correct. Just before you finished, Mr. Canick asked you some questions about a podcast where you indicated you didn't like the term victim, right? Correct. In that same podcast, you also said you didn't like the term survivor. Correct. Mr. Canick asked you a lot of questions about choices you made. Do you remember those questions? Correct. And pretty much all of the questions asked you about choices to get on flights and choices to contact Diana, those were all things you had talked about and testified about on direct examination, correct? Correct. In your time seeing the defendant also made some choices, correct? Correct. Objection. Overruled. The defendant chose not to tell you he had herpes, correct? Correct. The defendant chose to ignore you when you said you weren't comfortable with sex, correct? Correct. In Los Angeles, the defendant chose to grab the back of your head, put his peen in your mouth, keep his hand pushing towards his penis with a gun next to him, correct? Correct. No further questions. Any recross? Yes. And you made the choice to go back to see him, right? Correct. After he had done all those things to you, correct? According to you, right? Correct. In fact, you didn't make the choice to go to another city. You went to several other cities. Am I correct? To visit him after that. After what? You don't know what I'm talking about? I don't. Okay, I don't actually either. Canick. We're talking about the fact the government just asked her on redirect. The easiest thing to do is put the question again if you don't mind. Okay, after you saw it was in LA that, according to you, he grabbed your head, put it on his peen. Correct. And according to you, it was in LA that he had the gun next to him when he did this. Correct. And after that, you went to see him in another city. Am I correct? Correct. One last time. But you went to see him in another city after that. Am I correct? Yes. What city was that? New York. You went through making the choice of contacting him for another trip. Am I correct? Correct. The government asked you a short while ago about you were told to ask Diana to give you permission to do things. I'm sorry, can you ask that question again? You testified a short while ago in a question that put to you that you were told to ask Diana for permission to do things. That's incorrect. That's not what I said. My question was that asked of you a short while ago by the government? No. You didn't ask her, say you had to ask Diana for permission? No. You didn't have to ask anyone for permission? I had to ask your client, R. Kelly. Beg your pardon? R. Kelly. R. Kelly is who you had to ask for permission? Correct. The permission that you were seeking is what R. Kelly told you to check in with Diana to make sure that she knows where you are and make sure that you're okay. Isn't that a fact? Correct. Thank you. Anything else? No, Your Honor. Okay, the witness can step down. I think this is a good time to take our afternoon break. It will be about 10 minutes. Don't talk about the case. We'll see you soon. All rise. And then Donnelly. I trust there is nothing anybody else has to bring up before the break. No, Your Honor. No, Your Honor. Who is the next witness? And then Shahida replies, Kelly. And then Donnelly says, well, see you after the break. And then Geddes, one small matter. Our witness, I believe, after this next witness is going to be testifying by video. I think we'll just need like a few minutes to set up the video. Donnelly, that's fine. There's a brief recess. And then the court, Donnelly comes back and says, just before we call the next witness, I need to see Ms. Shahada and Mr. Kanik at sidebar. We don't need the reporter. So there was a discussion held off the record at sidebar. Donnelly, do you want to get the witness unless there is anything somebody wants to raise? All right. And then the witness enters, the jury enters the courtroom, the deputy, all rise, you may be seated. Donnelly, we are ready to continue. Will you call your next witness, please? And then Ms. Shahada, the government calls Kelly. Witness takes the stand. And then the deputy swears them in. And then the witness, I do. You may be seated. And then Donnelly tells the witness, you can take your mask off. Just a couple of things before we start. Our court reporter takes down everything that you say. So it's important that you don't speak too quickly or talk over whichever lawyer is asking you questions. If there is a question that isn't clear to you or you don't understand, just let me know. I'll direct the lawyer to rephrase it. The last thing is just do your best to answer only the questions that you're being asked. All right, go ahead. Kelly, called as a witness, having been first duly sworn, affirmed, was examined and testified as to the following. Okay, guys, so this Kelly person is actually Faith's mother who has taken the stand right now. I am in the process of losing my voice, so I'm not sure if my trying to switch up my voice with these different people is coming through effectively. But I am going to try and go until it just gets unbearable for me right now, because I really want to wrap this up. I don't want to have to create a second video. So Miss Shahida is questioning Kelly Rogers, and so she says, good afternoon. Where did you grow up? San Antonio. Is that where you live now? Yes. Are you employed? Yes. What kind of work do you do? Childcare business. Are you married? Yes. How long have you been married? 29 years. What, if anything, does your husband do? He works for Southside Independent School District. Is he an administrator there? Yes. Does he do anything else? He's a pastor. Do you have any children with your husband? Yes. How many children do you have? 2. I'm showing you what is in evidence as Government's Exhibit 79. Is this your daughter, Faith? Yes. Without saying your last name, do you and Faith have the same last name? Yes. When was Faith born? June 20th, 97. I want to direct your attention, withdrawn, Are you familiar with the docuseries called SRK? Yes. Did Faith appear in SRK? Yes. I want to direct your attention to early December 2018. Did you travel to New York City at that time? Yes. Who, if anyone, did you travel with? Faith. What were you going to New York to do? To watch the premiere of SRK. Did you stay at a hotel in Manhattan? Yes. Did you attend the premiere? Yes. At some point after you arrived at the premiere, were you evacuated? Yes. Where did you go after you were evacuated? Back to the hotel. Showing you in evidence as Government's Exhibit 80, do you recognize this person? Yes. Have you met this person? Yes. Who is this person? Kash. When did you first meet Kash? At the hotel. Was that after you were evacuated from the premiere? Yes. Where did you see her at the hotel? In the downstairs lobby. What, if any, conversation did you have with her at that time? As I was coming out of the elevator, she said hello. Objection, overruled. I would remind you that not to use your last name. Go ahead. You said, hello, Kelly. When she said it to you, okay, I'm sorry. So she told her not to say her last name and to go ahead. Then Kelly replied, she said, hello, Kelly. Okay, when she said it to you, did she say Mrs. and your last name? Yes. You can go ahead. Yes, I looked over to my right at her and I asked her who she was, and she proceeded to tell me she was Kash. Did she tell you anything else at the time? No. Did you see Kash again at some point? Yes. Where did you see Kash again? At the Applebee's. Was that same night? Yes. Who, if anyone, did you go to the Applebee's with that night? Faith. And anyone else? Yes. Who else? Summer. Was that a friend of Faith's? Yes. When you got to the Applebee's, was Kash there? Yes. Was she with anyone else? Yes. Who do you recall that she was with? A gentleman and another female. What, if anything, did you notice about the man that was with her? He was in the corner to my left, standing up against the wall, and he was in a suit. He proceeded to move his jacket over where I could see that he had a gun. You were at a table at this point. I was headed to the table. Did you eventually get to the table? Yes. Did you meet with Kash? Yes. What happened? What, if anything, do you recall Kash doing or saying at the table? She proceeded to tell Faith that she had a file, and Faith asked her what file. She handed Faith the telephone, and Faith looked at it briefly, slid it back to her, and told her she wasn't worried about that. At that time, did you see what was on the phone? No. I want to direct your attention to December 21st, 2018 and January 3rd, 2019. On those days, did you receive a series of texts related to Faith and others on those days? Yes. Do you recall what your phone number was at the time? Yes. Without saying it, is it still your phone number now? Yes. I'm showing the witness only what is marked for identification as Government's Exhibit 958. Do you recognize this phone number? Yes. What phone number is it? My phone number. I move to admit Government's Exhibit 958. No objection. That's in evidence. And then they enter 958 into evidence. Then Ms. Shahada, may we publish it to the jury only? When you received these texts, did you recognize the number that sent them? No. Sitting here today, do you recall the phone number that sent the text to you? Yes. You recall the precise number? Not the precise number, no. I'm showing the witness only what is marked for identification as Government's Exhibit 230A. Do you recognize this exhibit? Yes. Is it a 3-page exhibit? I'll just show you the pages. Are these certain of the texts that you received from that number that you didn't recognize? Yes. I move to admit Government's Exhibit 230A. No objection. Those are in evidence. Okay, may we publish it? Both? To the jury only. Okay. The text in green, was that from you to the person who is sending the text? Yes. And at the very top, it says two people. Do you see that? Yes. Do you know who these texts were sent to? Yes. Who is that? Who received the text from the unknown number? Gloria Allred. Who were the texts? You received the text, correct? I received them, yes. Who were they also sent to? Your daughter Faith? Yes. Had Faith recently changed her number at that time? Yes. The phone number that sent you the text. I'm going to turn to the second page. Do you see that number here? Yes. Can you read it out, please? 1-312-203-3030. Do you see a date, January 3rd, 2019, then additional text from that phone number? Yes. At the time you received that text from this 312-203-3030 number, was it fair to say that 312-203-3030 number was not saved in your phone, correct? Correct. In fact, it shows up as a number here, correct? Correct. Did you later provide screenshots of some of the texts that you received from this 312-203-3030 number to your attorney's office? Yes. After you did that, did your phone associate the 312-203-3030 number that sent those texts with your attorney? Yes. At some point, did a federal agent travel to Texas to take photos of all the texts you received from the 312-203-3030 number? Yes. I'm going to show the witness only what is marked for identification as Government's Exhibit 230B. If I may approach, Your Honor. Yes. Can you take a quick look at the document I just handed you? The witness is reviewing the document. Having reviewed Documents Exhibit 230B, are these photographs of the text you received from 312-203-3030 from your phone at the time? Yes. I move to admit Government's Exhibit 230B. No objection. That's in evidence, jury only. The first page can be to everyone. Okay. So the date at the top, does that say December 21st, 2018? Yes. At the time these photographs were taken, was this when after you had sent certain of the texts to your attorney? Yes. You testified earlier that your iPhone, was this an iPhone, by the way? Yes. Did your iPhone start to associate it with your attorney? Yes. So where it says maybe and is redacted, was that your attorney's name? Yes. The first two, was this an image that was sent to you, your phone, by that number? Yes. Do you see where it says survivor number 3, Geronda M. Pace Johnson? Yes. Before that, did the text you say, just a sample, we will see criminal charges, you've been warned? Yes. Was there another image that was sent to you? Yes. Were there various images that were sent to you after that from the same number? Yes. I'm going to turn to page 3 of Government's Exhibit 230B. This is for the jury only. Looking towards the bottom of the page, were you sent by this 312 number an image that said survivor number 7, Faith, then Faith's last name? Yes. I'm going to turn to page 4 of the exhibit again for the jury only. Were you sent certain images of your daughter Faith and certain photographs of text messages? Yes. These are the images you were sent. Yes. Does it appear to have some text below each line of images? Yes. Then these are the text messages, photographs of text messages you were sent. Yes. Below that, does it say to be continued? Yes. In green, was that a message you sent back to the person who sent you these texts? Yes. You wrote, who sent this? Yes. Then turning to page 5 of the exhibit, after you sent, who sent this, did the person respond, criminal charges to follow? Yes. Then sent you some additional images of other people? Yes. I want to turn to page 15 of the exhibit. This can be to everyone. Did the person who was sending you these texts write publishing soon? Yes. Then how did you respond? Who is this texting? Kash? Were you referring there to the Kash that you had met at the Applebee's? Yes. What did you write after that? You are stupid and you were a real man. Just call and let's talk about this. It's Faith's mom. Was there a typo in what you wrote there? Yes. When you said if you were a real man, who were you referring to when you sent that? Robert Kelly. Was that based on the content of the text that you had received? Yes. Did you then receive a response from the sender saying, "No, this is Colin. My investigation will be done soon enough"? Yes. There is a response from you in green, correct? Yes. It says, "No, seriously, call me back. I have another question." Yes. Between the text where the sender said, "No, this is Colin, my investigation will be done soon enough," and the text from you that follows, did you receive a phone call? Yes. And what happened on that phone call? I don't recall. Did you receive a phone call from the same number that was texting you? Yes. And do you recall anything about what transpired on that phone call? I do recall him saying he was an investigator for Robert Kelly. And did he say what he wanted you to do? He wanted me to drop the case. Now, after you sent that text, did you receive text again from the same number on January 3rd, 2019? Yes. And did the text say, "Pull the plug or you will be exposed"? Yes. And we went over just a moment ago the text that you had received photographs of your daughter and the photographs of text messages that you received from this number, correct? Yes. And I am now showing the witness only page 18 of Government Exhibit 230. This is now just for the jury only. Again, is this just the actual images that were sent to you? Yes. And again, it was followed with "to be continued." Yes. No further questions. All right. Cross-examination. Canic, may I please that, please? May I see that, please? So, Canic, good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon. You testified and told us that you had received a text from someone by the name of Colin. Yes. And that person told you that he was an investigator. Yes. And you testified and told us that that was an investigator of Robert Kelly. Yes. Do you know whether or not Robert Kelly had an investigator by the name of Colin? No. That's just something that someone told you, right? Yes. Now you have spoken to Robert, am I correct? No. You don't recall having a brief conversation with Robert over FaceTime when he was talking with Faith? I recall being in the mall one day when he called Faith and Faith flashed the phone and I just said hi. You said hi. That's it. No conversation whatsoever? No. I think that's it, Your Honor. Just 1 second. You ever met this investigator? No. And before that date that you received this text, you had no other communication from him? No. And according to you, he told you that he worked for Robert? Yes. But you don't know that to be a fact. No. Thank you. Any redirect? Yes, 1 moment, Your Honor. Okay. No further questions. Thank you so much. You can step down. Thank you. Just be careful of the wires there. Yes. And then the witness is excused. Donnelly. All right. Are we ready? I guess we need a couple of minutes. The next witness is going to be testifying over the video. Does that require a break? It really does not, does it? And then Miss Melendez. I don't believe so. Donnelly. We've got the expert here, so then Melendez cuts her off. We just need a moment to move the video screen. Donnelly, and what is the name of the witness? And then Melendez, Nathan Edmond, Your Honor. Donnelly, okay, ready to call the witness? Melendez, yes, Your Honor. Government calls Nathan Edmond to the stand and the witness appears by video. And then the clerk asks Mr. Edmond to please stand and rise and raise his right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? Donnelly, whoops, I'm still having trouble hearing. I take it that he can hear us. Then he said, do you hear me? Yes. Donnelly, good. Okay, let's try again. I affirm. You affirm? He affirms. Yes. Okay, Donnelly. Okay, have a seat. Just a couple of things. We have a court reporter who takes down everything. You know, she's giving her spiel about please speak up. The second thing is that if you don't understand the question, let her know, not the attorney. Let her know, and she'll have the attorney either repeat it or rephrase it, and just do your best to answer only the question you are asked, okay? Yes. Okay, go ahead. And so Nathan Edmond, called by the government, having been first duly affirmed, was examined and testified as to the following. So Ms. Melendez. Good afternoon, Mr. Edmond. Good afternoon. Mr. Edmond, did you receive a subpoena to testify here today? Yes. And do you want to be testifying today? Not especially. How old are you, Mr. Edmond? 73 years old. And are you employed? Self-employed. Are you employed? In the real estate business. Other than working in the real estate business, do you work in any other professions? No. Mr. Edmond, are you a minister? Yes, I am. Are you a minister at a particular church? Yes. And how long have you been a minister? Oh, probably over 30 years. In your capacity as a minister, have you officiated weddings? Yes, I have. Are you licensed to officiate weddings? Yes, I am. Are you approximately, when did you first receive your license? Maybe in early 90s or late 80s something. I don't remember exactly. And approximately, when did you first begin to officiate weddings? Not too long after I got the license. And approximately, in your time as a minister after receiving your license, how many weddings have you officiated? Less than a dozen. Have you ever met an individual named Robert Kelly in person? Yes. Under what circumstances did you meet Robert Kelly? To perform a wedding ceremony. I'm showing you what's in evidence is Government Exhibit 803B. If you could hand the witness Government Exhibit 803B, please. If we could publish this, it's in evidence. Okay, Mr. Edmond, do you have a copy there of Government Exhibit 803B? Yes, I do. And what is this? This is a marriage license from the state of Illinois. On Government Exhibit 803B, I want to direct your attention to the bottom portion of the marriage license. Do you see that there? The portion where there is handwriting? Yes. So I want to direct your attention to that first line of handwriting where it says print name of person officiating. Do you see that there? Yes. And what does that say? Nathan J. Edmond. And did you write that? Yes, I did. And to the right of that, it says Elder Nathan J. Edmond, Sr. Did you also write that? Yes, I did. What's an elder? An elder is an ordained minister. And is it fair to say of the gospel? Sorry, what did you say at the end? An ordained minister of the gospel. Is it fair to say that was your title at the time? Yes. And below that it says, hereby certify that Robert S. Kelly and Aaliyah D. Holton were united in marriage by me at, and then there's an address. Do you see that there? Yes, I do. Did you also write what's written here, Robert S. Kelly and Aaliyah D. Holton? Did you write that? Yes, I did. And where it says, were united in marriage by me at 6501 North Menham Road, Rosemont, Illinois. And then there's an area code that says 60018. Did you write that as well? Yes, I did. And then going further, it says the county of Cook and the state of Illinois on the 31st day of August 1994. Did you fill that in? Yes, I did. And there's a signature to the right of that, Nathan J. Edmond. Is that your signature? Yes, it is. And below that, there's an address listed, 8515 South Indiana Avenue in Chicago, Illinois. Was that your address at the time? Yes, it was. Did you, in fact, officiate the wedding between Robert Kelly and Aaliyah Holton? Yes, I did. And prior to officiating the wedding, had you ever met Robert Kelly before? No. Prior to officiating the wedding, did you know who Robert Kelly was? No. Prior to officiating the wedding, had you ever met Aaliyah Holton? No. And did you know who Aaliyah Holton was prior to officiating the wedding? No. So, when did you first meet Robert Kelly and Aaliyah Holton? The day I officiated the wedding. Now, so you testified that you had not previously met Robert Kelly or Aaliyah Holton prior to officiating the wedding. So how did it become to pass that you presided over their wedding? A friend of Mr. Kelly's was also a friend and a business associate of mine, and he asked me to do him a favor, and I agreed. Who is that friend? Keith Williams. And how did you know Keith Williams? He was in the mortgage business and I was in the real estate business. And so you knew him through your business contacts? Yes. Now, at the time that Keith Williams contacted you to do this favor for Robert Kelly, did you know whose wedding specifically you would be officiating? No. And where did the wedding take place? It took place at 6501 North Mannheim Road, which was a large hotel. I don't remember whether it was the Marriott or the Hilton or something like that. Okay, and looking at again to Government Exhibit 803B, where you wrote that location, 6501 North Mannheim Road, you don't recall the name of the hotel, but you recall that it was a hotel, correct? Yes, I don't remember. And where in the hotel did the wedding take place? In a private room. And can you describe the room, generally speaking? The room had a private bedroom and it had an open area where it had a couch, you could sit down, and then I think it had a table and just an open area and a television, something like that. And when you arrived at the hotel suite, when you arrived there, who was present? Mr. Williams and about 3 other gentlemen. And can you describe the gentlemen? Just was 3 African American gentlemen, about 5'7" to 10, and Mr. Williams and myself. So what, if anything, happened first when you arrived at the hotel suite? I was introduced to one of the gentlemen, and after being introduced to him, he gave me the marriage license, and then I looked at the marriage license. It was an official marriage license from the Cook County, and I filled in everything like you said here in the document. Other than the marriage license, were you presented with anything else to sign? Yes. And what were you presented with? What was to be a confidentiality agreement? And what, if anything, did you do when you were presented with this confidentiality agreement? I looked at it, I read it, and then I kind of chuckled. And, he asked me, why did I do that? And I said to him, because it wasn't worth the paper that it was written on. What did you mean by that? I meant that if it was supposed to be a confidentiality agreement, it should have been a lot more airtight than that. And what, if anything else, did you say after you sort of chuckled at the idea of the confidentiality agreement? Well, he said to me, asked me, would I give him my word that I wouldn't talk about this? So I said, yeah, I gave him my word. I give you my word. I mean, I don't know. I didn't know why, but I said, I give you my word. And he said, okay. And so what, if anything, happened once you decided that you weren't going to sign the confidentiality agreement, but you would give your word that you wouldn't tell anyone about what you were doing that day? What happened next? Well, after I chuckled, after then he said, well, forget it, it wasn't necessary, if I give him my word. I told him I honored my word, and that was it. And what happened after that, he said, asked me, was I ready? And I said, yes, I'm ready. And what happened next? The door opened to the bedroom, and out stepped, I guess, Aaliyah and Mr. Kelly. Now, can you please describe Aaliyah Holton's appearance when you saw her on that date? Yes, they both had on what looked like matching jogging suits, and they both had one leg on the jogging suit up to the knee. Okay, I know in a previous video I already talked about my thoughts on what this man is saying. Now, he lost me with the jogging suits. Now, when they were on one of them shows with BET that BET used to carry, whatever show they were on, child, I'm getting tired. Whatever show they were on being interviewed, didn't they have those matching jogging suits? So it seems like he's describing that scene, like somebody told him, oh, when you go testify, look at this picture, and then that's what we want you to say they had on. Because like if he was traveling from the airport, they had to go and get the fake ID and then get back to the hotel. When did they have time to change into these outfits? Who picked out these outfits? Where did the outfits come from? So he says, so then she asks, what, if anything else, did you notice Aaliyah Holton? I didn't notice anything else about her other than the fact that you couldn't see her whole face because her hair was over half of her face. And can you please describe the ceremony itself? Well, the ceremony was just, they stood before me, and you have a minister's book to do weddings, and that's what just standard. And you say, dearly beloved, we gathered here together, here in the sight of God, and these witnesses to join together, Aaliyah Holton, Robert Kelly, and Aaliyah Holton in holy matrimony. And you pretty much read the ceremony. And did you in fact do that? Yes, that's what I did. And did Robert Kelly and Aaliyah Holton exchange vows? Yes, they did. And at the end of the ceremony, did you pronounce Robert Kelly and Aaliyah Holton as husband and wife? Yes, I did. And how long did the ceremony last? About 10 minutes or less. After you finished officiating the wedding, what happened next? After I finished officiating the wedding, like you standardly do, you may kiss the bride. And they did. And I think they walked back into the room. I think I might have said something to the gentleman that showed me the license. Normally, one of two things can happen. Either the minister keeps the license and turns it in to the county, or the family keeps the license and turns it over to the county. So I thought that I was going to take it, and he said, no, we'll take it from here. And that was it. And so did you turn in the license to the county clerk's office? No, I didn't. They did. Did you receive any payment for officiating the wedding? I think they offered me, what was it, $25 or $50 or something like that. Keith might have said, he might have asked me. I was just doing it as a favor. I wasn't doing it for, no money. I didn't think it was anybody special, and I didn't understand it at all. Mr. Edmond, I am now showing you Government Exhibit 89. Do you have that there in front of you, a copy of that? Yes. Do you recognize Government Exhibit 89? We can publish this. It's in. Yes. And what is that? That's me. It's a picture of me a little younger. fair to say you were a little younger in that photograph? Yes. You previously testified that when you first walked into the hotel suite, you were asked to sign a confidentiality agreement, and that instead you gave your word that you wouldn't reveal to anyone that you had performed the ceremony between Robert Kelly and Aaliyah Holton. Since officiating that wedding, have you been approached by individuals from the media or the public about the wedding? Yes, radio stations, other people approached me, but one radio station kept calling my house. And despite being approached by the media and others, have you spoken publicly before today about the wedding you officiated between Robert Kelly and Aaliyah Holton? Objection to relevance? Not at all. Overruled. Oh no, then the guy said not at all, and Donnelly overruled the objection. I'm sorry, you said not at all. Not at all. Nothing further. Cross-examination? None. All right, thank you so much, sir. You can, I guess we can turn off the video. Thanks a lot. Okay, you're welcome. Then the witness is excused. And then Donnelly, do you have an additional witness? And then Shahida, yes, the government calls Tracy Montenegro. Is she a video witness also? No, and it's a he. Witness enters and takes the stand. He's sworn in. He's asked to state the full name. He said Tracy Montenegro, first name Tracy, last name Montenegro. And then the deputy thanks him. Then Donnelly, you can take your mask off. So just a few things before we start, and then she gives her spiel about talking into the mic and all that good stuff. And then let's see, and for the same reason, okay, then she's continuing with her instructions. And then the witness said, all right, thank you, Your Honor. And then Donnelly said, all right, go ahead. And then Ms. Shahada, thank you, Your Honor. And before I begin the questioning, I'd like to admit Government's Exhibit 957 as a certified business record from Apple pursuant to Federal Rule of Evidence 8036 and 90211, and the business record certification has been marked as Government Exhibit 957A. Donnelly, and this is on consent. Canick, yes. Donnelly, okay. And so they entered the exhibits. So then Tracy Montenegro, called as a witness by the government, having been duly sworn, affirmed by the courtroom deputy, was examined and testified as follows. So Ms. Shahida, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Mr. Montenegro, where do you work? I work for Apple. Can you just make sure you're speaking into the... Oh, yes. Great. Thank you. I work for Apple, 5th Avenue in Midtown Manhattan. And how far did you go in school? Bachelor's degree and then a Juris Doctorate degree. And what is your position, your current position at Apple? My current title is lead genius. And then Donnelly is what? That's a lead genius. Okay, a lead genius? Yes, it's part of the management team for technical support in store. All right, go ahead. So Miss Shahida. Donnelly knows she is a mess. That's a great title. And what does it mean? What does the position of lead genius, what does that mean? Lead genius is a customer and technical point of escalation for everyday issues arising in the store. Also, manage the staff. Make sure we have adequate staffing and customers are seen in a timely fashion. And does that include management of the Genius Bar? Yes, that is specifically for the Genius Bar. And that's the technical support? Yes. Now, how long have you held the position of lead genius? 4 years approximately. And how long have you worked at Apple total? In total, just under 17 years. And prior to your position as lead genius at Apple, what other types of positions have you held? Prior to lead genius, I was a genius and then a lead specialist, so lead for the sales team. And prior to that, at a different location, I was part of the full-time management staff. Now, in your 17 years working at Apple in various positions, have you become familiar with Apple products, including iPhones and iPads? Yes. Now, I'm showing you what's in evidence as Government Exhibits 957. I see it. Is this a spreadsheet of iPad production history from 2010 to 2021 and iPhone production history from 2008 to 2014? Yes. The exhibit is published. Okay. And is this a certified business record from Apple? Yes, it tracks the manufacturing of Apple products and models and subsequent models and generations. Donnelly, a little trouble hearing you, so just make sure you're speaking into the microphone. Oh, okay, yes, Your Honor. And looking at this exhibit, the first column, the first part of it relates to iPads, correct? That's correct. And then below that, there's some information about iPhones. Is that correct? Yes, correct. Now, the first iPad, the iPad first generation, was that released in April 2010? Yes, it was. And the production site for the first generation of iPads, was that a location in China? That was, yes. And thereafter, does this document show the other types of iPads and generations up through March 2020 through TBD? Yes, every generation of iPad released since then. And looking at this document, has every generation of iPad been produced by a production site outside the United States? Yes, it was. In either locations in China or locations in Brazil. That's correct. And now, turning to the portion of the spreadsheet related to iPad production history from 2008 to 2014, does that indicate that the iPhone 3G was released in 2008? Yes, it was, and produced at a location in China. Yes. And the iPhone 3GS was released in June 2009 and produced in a location in China. Yes, that's correct. And finally, the iPhone 4 was released in July 2010, and all iPhone 4s were produced in either a location in China or a location in Brazil. That's correct. Now, what is the first iPhone that had video recording capability? The first iPhone that had video recording capability was the iPhone 3GS. And what is the first iPad that had video recording capability? That was actually the iPad 2 or the second generation. And so on this government exhibit 257, that's the iPad second generation that was released in March 2011. That is correct. And currently, do iPhones and iPads have front and back cameras? Yes, currently all models of iPhones and iPads have front-facing and rear-facing cameras. And can you explain to the jury what that means? Donnelly, in a louder voice. Witness, yes. Donnelly, thanks. Okay, a front-facing camera is a camera that's located along the display of above the viewing area of the display, and it looks at the person viewing the screen as they're holding the device up. It shows, how selfies were born, and the rear-facing camera is on the back of the devices, and it faces away from the person holding or viewing the display. And what was the first iPhone that had a front-facing camera as well as a back-facing camera? That was actually the iPhone 4. Okay, and looking here, that was released in July 2010, correct? Correct. And how about iPad? You testified earlier that the first iPad with video recording capability was an iPad 2. Second generation, correct? Correct. And since when have iPads been both front and back facing cameras? That I cannot recall off the top of my head. Okay. Now, are you familiar with the text messaging capabilities of iPhones? Yes. And are you familiar with something known as iMessage? Yes. What is iMessage? iMessage is an Apple service that is offered aside from standard text messaging. That standard text messaging goes through your carrier. So you have to have a carrier connection connected to one of the satellites with one of the main carriers, for example. iMessage always allows you to bypass that and utilize an Apple-based messaging service that uses Apple Cloud, if you will, Apple services, or Apple servers. So as long as you have any kind of network connection, you can send a direct message to someone. So it doesn't go through your telephone carrier, is that right? That's correct. And do both individuals need to have an Apple device to participate in iMessage? Yes. Now, when an individual receives or sends text messages or iMessages on their phone, does it often display the date and time of those messages? It keeps the date. It only shows the date right above the first message sent for that day, and then it keeps the date relative until it goes back a week, and then it starts listing the date. Okay, the time is hidden, but if you swipe slightly across the messages, you will see the time stamps for each individual message. And is the time indicated, the time stamp for messages, is that the local time where the phone is at the time they're looking at the phone? Based on the time zone set on the device, that usually is defaulted by your local region. But some people, for different reasons, keep it to their home time zone. Okay, but the default is wherever the phone is, that's the time that will show up. That's correct. That's the default. So just to be clear, if I'm looking at the text messages in New York, my prior text messages, the date and time stamp will be in my local New York time. Is that right? That's right. And if I travel to another time zone and look at those same messages, the date and time will be in that other local time zone. Correct. Now, you testified that iMessages don't go through the phone carrier and are between Apple devices, correct? That's correct. And when you look at the messages, is there anything that distinguishes an iMessage from a text message as far as the color of the message or anything like that? Yes, it's specifically the color of the messages. iMessages are sent in blue, what we affectionately call bubbles. The cellular-based messages or standard text messages are in green. And are any messages in gray on an iPhone? No response. Or let me show you an example hold on one second. So I'm showing you what's in evidence as the first page of Government Exhibit 208A. Do you see that in front of you? I do. And the green, I think you just testified, does that signify these are text messages, not iMessages? Correct. And do you see how some messages are in green and some messages are in gray? Correct. What, if anything, does that signify? The ones in gray and usually on the left side of the messaging window are from the person you're sending a message to. Okay. So green is, if this is my phone, I am sending the messages in green. Correct. And the person who's responding is in gray. Correct. Now, you testified You didn't recall precisely when iPads began to have both front and back cameras, correct? Initially, but I was thinking about it, yes. Okay, do you recall now? Yes, it was the second generation. The second generation iPad? Yes. And so, I'm sorry. And so, what? Okay, let me get myself together here. So, Shahada. And so that would be, looking at government exhibit 957, that would be the one that was released in March 2011. Correct. So since that date, iPads have been both front-facing and back-facing cameras. That's correct. Okay, no further questions. All right, any cross? None. Okay, thank you so much. You can step down. Thank you. Your Honor, I think we've run out of witnesses for today. Well, that's okay. All right, so we are going to stop for today, but I think we're moving along very well. So we will see you tomorrow at 9:30. Please don't talk about the case or read any accounts or watch any television accounts. If there are any about the case at all, don't talk about it with anybody, but do have a good night, and I'll see you tomorrow. All rise. All right, everybody can have a seat. So what do we anticipate tomorrow in terms of witnesses? So Geddes, and when I say Geddes, I'm talking about Elizabeth Geddes. She is the lead attorney in this prosecution of Mr. Kelly. Can we approach? Do you mind? Sure. Do we need the reporter? No. Okay. Sidebar held off the record with the court and counsel only. Donnelly. All right, we were just having a quick conversation about scheduling, and so there is some uncertainty about how many witnesses we will have tomorrow, and so the government is going to let the defense know how many and who as soon as they possibly can. So I mean, this happens during trials every once in a while. So we will see where we are tomorrow. All right. Okay. Anything else that we need to put in the record? Canick, not from us, Your Honor. Donnelly. Okay. Geddes or us. Thank you. Donnelly. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. And that was that. Okay. So they had Faith on for most of the day. Then her mom did a quick stint at the witness stand. Then when she was done, Nathan Edmond, who claims that he married Kelly and Aaliyah. And then after he finished, we had this Tracy Montenegro, who is from Apple and works with the iPad. And then we had several text messages that were entered into evidence that really didn't prove anything. So guys, that's it for me. As always, leave your comments below, rate the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I shall talk to you guys later. Bye bye.